If you've ever been a part of a job interview process, you know that, like an onion, there's layers to it. You usually go in with an application and a resume that has shown what your accolades have been. Compare that to a college player with their game tape. That is their resume. But a lot of them may have similar resumes, just as you do when you were in this interview process. And you have to do something that kind of stands you out further than the other applicant. And that is where the NFL Combine takes place. Yes, there are pros. Yes, there are cons. But this is a perfect platform for all these young adult athletes to stand out versus their peers. And that is overall what the NFL Combine is all about. Whether you love or hate it, I think it does bring out a great personality side to a lot of these players to then, inch themselves closer to the NFL. We're going to talk just about that today. I'm your host, Matthew Raridan, and welcome to the Snap Count Show. Welcome to another episode of the Snap Count Show. I'm your host, Matthew Raridan, and with me today is none other than David Street.
Greetings from my SUV.
And Ed Smith.
Heyo!
The three amigos. We are back. Thaddeus cannot make it tonight, so it is up to us three to talk about the Combine as a whole and the Combine specifically that just took place here this last weekend. This is a very vital part of the offseason. This is the start of the offseason after the Super Bowl, where there's still plenty of action to be taken place. And like I said in my opening monologue, there are people who like it. There are people who dislike the Combine, but I still think that there is value to it, but not necessarily maybe for the first 10, 15 entrants in the draft, as a lot of those are kind of already in place where they're going to be drafted. But a lot of these guys that are still trying to make a name for themselves and get to the big leagues, this is where they could really showcase their skills and where they can separate themselves from the rest. And David, we've all seen it of players making a name for themselves at the Combine that could really improve their draft stock. But players like Fernando Mendoza, Caleb Downs, a lot of these players that were only there just for the measurements, they don't really have a whole lot to prove, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of times the combine, in some cases, is more for players who, didn't have the best numbers in college, right? But there's just something about their athleticism. They seem to have a high ceiling. Like one guy that comes to mind is Taylon Green of Arkansas. You look at his numbers, not just at Arkansas. I forget where he played before Arkansas, but his overall college numbers, right? They're not the greatest, but his combine numbers are some of the best that we've ever seen. Now, Ed, let me ask you this: does this remind you of a certain player? Average at best in college, amazing combine numbers. Like recently in college.
God, put me on the spot, why don't you? I mean, I'm not sure where you're going with this.
I'll give you a major hint. Who am I a fan of in college?
AR-15, baby.
Yes, exactly. Anthony Richardson, average at best in college, but had amazing combine numbers. Taylon Green reminds me of him. Average numbers at best in college, but has produced an amazing combine.
Yeah, and it is tough talking about a player like Anthony Richardson because, his story is yet to really be written. He's dealt with injuries, and right now he's floating very close with the bust territory. But at the same time, he was average at best. It was his ceiling was higher, so they were hoping that he would eventually develop into that, Ed.
And not to mention, he's on the block for trade.
Yes.
He's working with his organization to try and find him a new home because he's obviously not going to work well in the system that he's in now because he's kind of burned the bridges there.
Yeah, and they got
Yeah,
Daniel Jones already. He's gonna. It sounds like he's gonna be their guy. So, but that system just isn't working with him.
Right. Now, for me, the other part of what you were saying, David, is there are so many schools that have separate pro days that are basically a traveling combine
yeah,
from school to school to school to school. So when you have players like Emmanuel McNeil Warren, the safety out of Toledo, the NFL is not going to set up an entire day pro day at Toledo to see the Rockets.
no, yeah,
That's not going to happen. This is the job interview where a player like that I think gets the opportunity to shine, as opposed to say somebody like Michael Taff. Uh, we all know he's going to be a mid-level guy. Caleb Downs, we know he's going to be in the top 10. We just don't know where, because I've seen mocks be anywhere from 2 to 10
mm,
for him coming up in this draft. So for these players that are in these schools that only have one prospect or two prospects, these are the guys that need to be at this combine. The schools that have 13 players drafted per year, a la Texas or Michigan, I don't see any reason why those guys are at the combine at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Ohio State brass that pretty much were representing at this combine, and it's like I mean, I hate saying this because I don't want to sound arrogant, but like none of them even had to do anything. A lot of their work has already been their resume, their film. It's
mm,
everything has already pretty much been said and done. But like I said, you want to at least do what you can to kind of get yourself above maybe your peers. But I have to give a shout out to Notre Dame, the two running backs there with Jeremiah Love and Price because Love is already guaranteed to be the number one running back, but he still went out there. He still showed up, and so did Price. That's going to be a fun pro day to watch too between those two.
mm,
But they still
yeah,
went there and did
and
their thing.
also, and I kind of implied it, but there's also no doubt that the combine definitely overrates a lot of players. Like I remember when was it, like 10 years ago maybe, but a while ago, everybody gushed over John Ross's what do you call it, a 40 yard time, or everybody gushed about how fast he was, and he hasn't done jack squat in the NFL since.
Yeah, I mean, a lot could be said about that. I mean, I know Xavier Worthy holds the record now, and Xavier Worthy has done decent in the NFL, but it, I think that there is a lot to be said that just because you have the fastest time doesn't mean that you're going to be the best receiver in the NFL. But
Yeah,
there have been a lot of players though that have really put up some great numbers at the combine and have done well. But there's others that don't. I mean, I know he was part of my team, so it comes to mind. But Chase Claypool, his size, he was a freak of nature. He was being compared to DK Metcalf, who absolutely crushed his combine. I mean, that really propelled him a lot in the first round. But Chase Claypool, with his size and the numbers he was putting up, they thought for sure he'd be great in the NFL. He'll be the next DK Metcalf. That was the furthest from the truth.
And at some point, there was a switch in which players trained for these tests at the combine as opposed to training for the play that they are going to be asked to complete when they're on the field in the NFL. And it all started, and believe it or not, way back in 1989 with Tony Mandarich,
mm,
uh, that everybody says is the biggest bust in NFL history. He wound up having a decent career as a guard in Indianapolis, but he wasn't a number one pick. But his combine numbers were so off the charts compared to his peers. That's why he got drafted number one. Then you had, just to go more historical perspective, you had Todd Marinovich. Uh, he was the Robo QB that got drafted by the Raiders, and he had been groomed and basically built to compete in the combine, and made himself a number one pick just by those metrics. Now players are doing it across the board. They're getting sprinter coaches to run the 40-yard dash. And that isn't necessarily what playing football is about. It's a great test of speed, but it's not what the game is all about. These combine numbers, they're a great metric, but they are not going to show you what a player these guys are.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and David, I'll ask you this as a fan, and you could answer it as a Bucks fan. But to you, what do you feel is more important? These players putting up numbers, or them passing pretty much the so-called psych exam that they have during these interviews?
When you say put up numbers, I assume you're talking about like combine numbers, but
Yeah.
are you talking about like so just combine numbers?
Yeah, I mean they have great 40-yard dash times, vertical cone drills, all of that, broad jumps.
Hmm.
Would you prefer, seeing that in a prospect that could be coming to Tampa Bay, or do you like knowing that they passed those psych exams with flying colors?
It actually depends on the position that my team is drafting. I would say, generally speaking, overall, I would probably put more of an emphasis on the combine numbers. But if it came to a player like a quarterback, right? Like the quarterback is supposed to be the smartest player on the team. He's supposed to be the leader, the one calling the shots. I would like to know that my quarterback isn't a total dumbass.
Yeah, I mean, because this does bring up a conversation because two of the greatest of all time at their positions, Tom Brady, Jerry Rice. All right, uh, you look at maybe their numbers at the combine; they weren't the greatest, but guess what? They had some of the greatest careers that we may ever see in our lifetime. So, just because you didn't put up numbers at the combine doesn't mean that your career is going to be shot. But there are some players that kind of need that edge. But I think as I think that's a great way you answered it as a quarterback, the leader of your team who should have the highest IQ on the team. He should be passing these psych exams that they pretty much put him through.
Yes.
And Ed, you are our Texas native, so you're not going to like this reference I'm about to say, but for those of you who have, and I can't trademark this, all right, this has already been trademarked, but for those of you who have gone to the famous fast food chain In and Out, you will notice that when you're ordering there, you can order animal style, okay? Well, that is kind of what I like to compare these athletes. When I see them at the combine, they're animals. They are. Yes, we've seen their film, their tape, and what they could do on the field. But I want to say this and not sound weird as possible, but you don't often see them without their pads on. Okay. You are seeing them pretty much bare bones at the NFL combine, and they are straight animals. And when I look at these numbers that have been put up this so far in this combine, the 40-yard dash times, every position group except quarterbacks had the fastest 40-yard dash times of all time at the NFL Combine, which further alludes to Ed's point. These guys are training more and more and more to get these numbers a lot better. But Ed, at the end of the day, we could all say these guys are animals, right? They are freaks.
Oh, you don't get to be in the NFL without being a physical freak
Mhm.
uh, and just a specimen of an individual that is playing a position on the football field, because you're talking about a sport in which you have 50 head-on collisions every a head-on collision every play that you're in. So yes, I know we're trying to be safer about it, uh, but it's still going to be a physically demanding sport, and it just gets more and more and more every year. But also keep in mind that the players are now regimented to keep their body at a certain level of readiness throughout the year that just didn't exist back, say, 35 years ago. It's just not the same. Back then, the players would show up in training camp to get themselves ready for the season. Now, every player is expected to maintain a certain level of fitness and a certain level of uh, muscle mass and a certain level of explosiveness and all these metrics going into the season.
Yeah, it just shows you just over time the amount of training, the working out, and so much has changed. And I still stand by this. Someone weighing 240 or more should not be running a 4.4 or better 40-yard dash. It's just so crazy to me. I even with Derrick Henry, I mean, I still I don't know how that guy does it at that size. But you look at players like Kenyon Sadiq, Oregon's tight end, 4.39 40 at his size, and it's like, how is this possible? I really don't know. Or David Eli Stowers with Vanderbilt tight end, highest vertical leap ever by a tight end. It just these numbers seem to get topped
Not
every year.
not just by tight end, highest ever among all position players.
It's just insane. I don't know how people can do this, especially with the size of their body. But I look at the Styles brothers from Ohio State. I think those two had an incredible weekend with the numbers that they put up. We already knew Sonny Styles is going to be a easy first rounder, but his brother, safety, who often gets underlooked because Caleb Downs, rightfully so, uh, he put up amazing numbers, and at their sizes it amazes me on what these players are able to do now. But I think now that we've talked a little bit about some of these numbers and some of these players that have stood out, is much going to change in the first round. We already know the consensus number one pick is going to be Fernando Mendoza of Indiana, okay? But after that, let's talk about the top 10, top 15 picks. Do any of them change? And the reason why I asked that question is because I think there needs to be a bigger discussion that needs to happen that we're going to do right now is, are teams going to choose best overall or what they need more? David, as a Tampa Bay fan, I'm sure you know several positions that you guys need. But come pick number 15 when you guys are on the board, are you going who you need or are you going best available at that point?
It's hard to tell because I believe like if you're in the top five or in the top 10, you're picking based off of what you need, right? Because you had a horrible season, and a big part of that is because you were severely lacking in one particular position. If you're picking in the lower part of the first round, at that point you're just kind of taking the best player available. But when you're 15th, you're like right there in the middle. So it's like you're kind of teetering between picking the best player available and picking based on what you need, right? I mean, as a Bucks fan, I would probably just draft as many defensive players as I can, or get rid of our head coach, but we didn't do
Well, I'll ask a similar question to you, Ed.
Yep.
Let's say you're a general manager, whether you're a general manager for the Green Bay Packers or just in general.
Mhm.
Uh, is there a guy that you may have circled that come your pick, although you may not need that position, that guy is still there? Are you taking that person?
There is a guy that I have in mind, and he really broke out into the national scene this year. He was very well known across colleges up until this past year, but because he became part of uh, a collective group that really dominated uh, their style of play, uh, for me, David Bailey out of Texas Tech, he is just he's everything that you want in a pass rusher, but I feel like he can still gain a little extra weight to him to help out with the run. He is so fast on his first step that it is amazing. And I think he's a guy that once you get past the first, I'm going to say even fewer picks than you, David. Once you get past the first 5 or 6, then you start looking at, okay, who's the guy that's going to help my team the most?
that.
Because when you are in that first 5 or 6, you have a glaring spot that needs to be filled.
Yeah.
Once you get past that fifth or sixth spot, then you're like, oh, we need athletes,
Yeah.
we need
Mhm.
players, to come in and make a difference. Once you get past 15 and beyond that, then it's okay, who's the best player on the board? Not not necessarily because you need them, but there's somebody that maybe you can start to build some things around in the next year or two versus the guys that are in that first 5, 6 picks that have to be stars this year to turn the culture around of that franchise.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that name up because that was going to be kind of what I was going to ask David is David Bailey. Are you seeing some parallels maybe with Jared Verse? Jared Verse, when he came out of Florida State, he came to this combine. It was already known that he was probably going to be that first edge rusher that's being taken off the board. You are a Florida fan, but still, Florida State, you are well aware of the talent that they have there. And Jared Verse was their most talented player on that field by far. Well, David Bailey is the same exception. He was their best player and he comes into this combine and he's looking great, but it's like you got Arvell Reese from Ohio State. David Bailey, though, there's a lot of parallels to Jared Verse, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize you were talking to me.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, I would certainly agree with that. And the thing about Jared Verse is that you could tell, right away how much of an impact player he was going to be for the Rams when they drafted him because he wins. I think he won Defensive Rookie of the Year, if I remember correctly. And already in his second year, and well, I guess technically third year now, he's arguably already the Rams' best defensive player. I mean, who else? I mean, maybe I'm partially saying that because the Rams, in my opinion, kind of run a no-name defense. I mean, other than Jared Verse, I can't name a single other player on that Rams defense. But yeah, Verse has been incredible so far.
Yeah. Another name that comes to mind to me because the safety position with Caleb Downs, he's going to be easily the first safety taken off the board. And
Mhm.
as of late, I've seen rumors that the Jets could even take him at two because
Yeah,
he's that talented. The Jets, though, they have holes everywhere. They have many needs that they need to
yeah,
to really fill. So I don't know. They don't
Which is a
surprise
good
me.
thing that they have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah,
mm,
they're sitting pretty good with draft capital, not only this year but next year. So when they
yeah.
clean house with Sauce Gardner and Quentin Williams, they collected these picks for the future, hoping to really build that team. That's why they kept Aaron Glenn. He wasn't one of the coaches that got fired in their first year, so they're hoping that they could build that team, but
Dude,
they've got a lot of holes.
there was a really funny graphic from a different sport, but just track with me here. But some time ago, I think it was during the NBA draft. Um, there was a funny graphic, like it was a serious graphic, but it was hilarious at the same time. It talked about a certain team. I don't remember what the team was, but it said team needs everything, and I feel like that's the Jets. Team needs everything.
It needs a new owner. It needs. I mean, it
Oh,
it needs a
Yeah,
lot of new things. So,
oh
but more than just players. But it is true, and I'm not trying to be here as a hater because at the end of the day, I'm pissed for Steelers fans. There's a lot of things we need too. So, but that's the NFL though for you. This is where it starts. It starts here. It starts really scouting your players. You scout them at the college level, at the combine. You've got free agency. There's a lot of tiers to it that really need to be perfected to really build that team. So the Jets they do have plenty of opportunities to do so within the draft, as they do have a lot of early draft picks the next couple years. So we will see there. But as I was saying, Caleb Downs, incredible safety, but the combine where you can make a name for yourself, and one of those guys is Dylan Thieneman coming out of Oregon because he ran an exceptional 40-yard dash. Because at that point, everyone knows Caleb Downs is going first. Well, what safety can really go after him? And you got to really make your name for yourselves. And Dylan Thieneman did an incredible job this combine to do that, to try to solidify himself as a
yeah.
number two safety.
And also, like we're talking about players whose combine numbers help them drastically, but it's also important to note, the players who already had amazing college careers, but their combine numbers helped them even more. And we already mentioned him, but one guy that sticks out to me is Eli Stowers, tight end from Vanderbilt. Had a great career at Vanderbilt, and had some of the best combine numbers we've seen, not just from a tight end, but also just from any player overall. So, like I said, great college career, even better combine numbers.
Yeah, Ed, you had a question that, and this could be just out there for, the audience to really kind of sink in and answer on themselves, but about the GM and the head coach. You want to go ahead and ask that?
Sure. So my question is, which franchise, which GM, which head coach is going to be caught in the crosshairs between what you need to get to uh, to kickstart your franchise and what you should get because they are a better player, uh, much better player overall. So I'm looking at the Giants with Jim Harbaugh there. He is going to go for an offensive lineman. He is an old school in the trenches type of guy. But if Caleb Downs is there, do you go ahead and skip your offensive lineman to get Caleb Downs because he is going to be a more impactful player than, say, if you go through the the offensive list and get Francis? My I'm gonna mess up this name. Muagoa out of Miami.
Mm.
Do you get the tackle out of Miami to save Jackson Dart's behind, or do you get Caleb Downs, who is going to be uh, what some would want to try and portray as an Ed Reed type safety that is going to be so impactful that he can cover up some of the other deficiencies on the defensive side?
Yeah, I mean, he's Mr. Do It All. I mean, and that is a great question to be asked because
Yeah.
in recent history, Ed, and correct me if I was wrong, we kind of experienced this with the tension between the head coach and the GM. Was it Bryce Young with Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
where they were bumping heads? One wanted him, one didn't, and ultimately he did get drafted. It is very common that this does happen, but now it's more in the public. It really is. With social media and all that, it's easier for things to become public, and that is a great question that you ask: is what GM, what head coach is going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place?
There is there is one clear example I can think of where a team drafted the best player available. It actually worked, but in an extremely short time frame, and that is when the Bengals took Jamar Chase. There was a big debate about should the Bengals take Jamar Chase, or I forget who the offensive lineman was at the
Panay
time.
Sewell.
Yes, Panay Sewell. Thank you, Matthew. Of course, you would remember that being the Oregon guy, right? A lot of people thought that Cincinnati should have taken Panay Sewell to protect Joe Burrow, and because Cincinnati's offensive line was horrible, right? A lot of people, when Cincinnati picked Jamar Chase, it was okay. Well, Jamar Chase is an incredible player, obviously, but that's not what Cincinnati needs. Well, sure enough, they go to the Super Bowl in Chase's rookie year, but as I said, it worked out in an extremely short time frame because since then it seems like Joe Burrow gets hurt all the dang time.
Well, and to go back even further, just because I'm the old guy here, I mean, I'm going to say a name, and I think we all know what we're talking about. Vince Young. Vince Young, he was drafted for the Titans out of Texas as a number three in the number three slot, which, my goodness, they didn't want him. The team did not want him. But the ownership group, the Bud Adams ownership group, wanted to get the the uh, the collective fan base of Houston to follow the Titans. So
Mm.
they really wanted Vince Young to be the future quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. And Jeff Fisher absolutely hated him. Hated him. So Vince Young only got to play because of injuries to, uh, gosh, I don't even remember who the quarterback was at this point.
It
Uh,
was it Kerry Collins?
yes, it was Kerry Collins.
Yeah.
And then Vince Young comes in, and has a miraculous 8 game stretch in which offs, and and the team still hates him.
Yeah.
So it was just a terrible situation all around. And that's the type of thing that, the ownership and the head coach, they've got to be in sync. And those are the of Seattle. You see out of Green Bay. You see out of Detroit at this point. You see out of Baltimore. You do not see that with the Jets. You do not see that with the Cardinals. You do not see that with the Browns. So the good chance that you will see a player drafted that is not what the team need is or the head coach wants to go ahead and move forward with that player. Now, there are situations in which that actually helps out for the player because you take a look at a certain Southern Mississippi quarterback that got drafted by the Falcons and then was then traded. Yes, we're talking about Brett Favre, who got traded to Green Bay after just 1 year in Atlanta because Jerry Glanville absolutely hated him and didn't want him on his roster. So
Mm,
it sometimes it works out for the player. More often than not, it is a terrible idea for the organization.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep, it's very, very, very true. So, speaking of Detroit, you brought them up really quick. I saw uh, the report earlier that David Montgomery they may be moving on from him, and I mean we'll talk more about free agency in the next couple of weeks. But I feel like that would be a big mistake. But I don't know how much of it is true because I think that what him and Jameer Gibbs have is very special there in that backfield.
I
So.
mean, if they're thinking about moving on from David Montgomery, to me, what that tells me is that they just want to move on from the two-headed running back, and they want to give most of the carries to Jameer Gibbs now.
Yeah. Yep. So, but and we'll see if that is indeed true. But uh, there's a lot of question marks still to be, you know, made with the combine and the next couple weeks as we have the pro days and just these one-on-one interviews that they're going to have with a lot of these top draft picks and the personnels from the franchises. So when we hear more, we'll definitely be talking about it, especially before the draft. And one thing that David,
Actually, I'll let you go because I want to hear if you're gonna mention him, but if not, I'll mention him.
I'm not because I'm not going to mention a specific player, but what I will say though is in the next couple weeks, be sure to be following us because we are going to be breaking down the new NFL cap increase because I think that actually takes a very big place into how a lot of these teams are going to be drafting this draft. So stay tuned for that. But David, what were we going to add?
I was gonna say that you know, from a pure vibes standpoint, the player from the combine that stuck out the most by far, we're all thinking it's Jennings Dunker from Iowa. For two reasons. First of all, his name is Jennings Dunker. Like I had to Google that. Like, is this actually his name? Yes, Jennings Dunker is a real person who exists. And also just that beautiful mullet. I mean, you can't go wrong with that.
That
Yeah,
flow is undefeated. Is he a giant or what?
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, is he's already got sponsorships from Copenhagen and Head and Shoulders. I mean, it's
dude. Wait, wait,
Hoodies,
wait.
hairbrushes,
yeah.
How has he? And maybe it will happen, but he needs to get a sponsorship from Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, your last name was Dunker, Dunkin' Donuts.
I'm sure the it's being signed on the dotted line right now. I mean, this guy stole the show on Sunday at the NFL Draft Combine. They'd probably never seen him take his helmet off before, but boy, did he wait for the perfect time on national headlines with just that luscious hair flow of the mullet. I mean,
Yeah.
he represented all of Iowa just in the 10 seconds he was on. So, yeah, I mean, way to make a name for yourself. Have the right haircut, and he sure did. So, but we appreciate you guys tuning in on this combine special. There's many names. There's many names out there that I'm sure that we missed or did not talk about. Feel free to let us know in the comments on who stood out to you, because there's always that one player that really stood out to you that may not have to others. So I urge you to let us know in the comments on who that player was, and maybe a sleeper, a dark horse that you think is going to have an amazing NFL career that maybe the media is not talking much about. We all like to pretend we're a GM, even though we're not, because we don't get paid for it. But sometimes, though, we do make very smart predictions that maybe they ought to listen to us, but that's maybe only one time out of 100. But hey, you're telling me there's a chance. Lloyd Christmas, okay? But till next time, guys, please hit that like, subscribe button, share these videos. That's the final whistle, and we'll catch you next week.